Now it's time for the 7 challenges and solutions to today's open enrollment. Over to you, Travis.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks to everyone for signing in and choosing to spend a little bit of your afternoon with us today. We definitely appreciate that. My name is Travis. I work on the account management side. I talk to clients year round, and open enrollment is one of the, the big items that we discuss and plan for each year. And I'm joined by Stephanie, who is one of our senior marketing and communications kind of gurus. And she helps to put together the employee communications and some of the pieces, as well as the strategies around open enrollment and really just employee education in general. So, we were talking a couple months ago, brainstorming about open enrollment and some of the challenges and whether it would be a good topic for us to have a session on. And a lot of the challenges around open enrollment have been around for a long time, right? So we see a lot of those same challenges kind of creep up again and again. And that can be, how do we engage our employees? How do we know if they're really retaining some of the information that we provide to them? Why do our employees, wait until the last minute every year to sign up for their benefits? And, even when you have a great year and it's a good open enrollment, you still get, 20, 25% of your employees that won't really do much or acknowledge much about your open enrollment. They may not hand in the paperwork or go through the portal access. So, these challenges have they've been kind of plaguing everyone that's involved around open enrollment for many, many years. But as Stephanie and I were talking about open enrollment and some of the challenges that we, we're seeing out there, we started to see a bit of a pattern and a structure to that. And, in the last few years, we've been presented with new obstacles to kind of conquer some of those same challenges and really ways that we've been talking to clients on how can we manage and maneuver around, the current environment and what opportunities are out there. So, what we were hoping to accomplish today is really to provide our attendees with maybe some tidbits of information that will be helpful as you start to think and prepare for open enrollment. We somehow very quickly transition from summer into the fall and open enrollment season. And for many of our clients, open enrollment is right around the corner. So we're hoping we can provide some tidbits that you can use in the short term and long term as well. But also an element of what we were hoping to share with everyone and have as a takeaway is starting to get your thoughts together and start to lay out a plan for open enrollment and a strategy, because open enrollment is a project. It's a project. And the better of a project plan that you have, usually the better that project will unfold and the better feedback that you get from that open enrollment process. So we're hopeful that some of what we'll talk about today will help you build out and maybe fine-tune some of your strategy and project planning, whether your open enrollment is around the corner or 10 months from now. And some of the things we'll talk about, you would need almost 10 months to kind of get your thoughts together. So we thought it would be an opportune time. Heather mentioned at the very onset that we do have a chat feature that's built in. And the chat feature is great for any questions that you have. So as we're going through, we're going to find some areas to pause and maybe see if there's questions that are applicable to what we're talking about. But we would very much welcome anyone's input or suggestions or even success stories around open enrollment or challenges that you're facing, or maybe ways that you've overcome things in the past. So if there's anything that you'd like to share, we are all ears. We're happy to share it with the rest of the attendees. And depending on how much interaction we have, how much content we have, we might also put together some supplemental pieces to go along with the presentation that we've got here today. So again, use that chat feature both for questions and to share, especially if you have success stories. We would love to hear them. So with that, I am going to move us into our first section here. So we have the foundations of open enrollment. And again, most of what we're going to talk about is going to tie back to one of these 5 bullet points in some way, shape, or form. That's planning, budgeting, communication channels, the frequency and methods that you get your communication and education material out, the logistics around planning open enrollment meetings, and then also some of your post-enrollment strategy. Now, these should probably be all sort of old terms to everyone if you've been involved or led open enrollments, but these are really the foundations that we're going to tie most of our ideas and thoughts back to. And again, we're going to send this presentation out, so don't feel like you have to furiously take notes on any of the pieces that are in here. So as we move into challenge number 1, this has by far been the most common topic of discussion around open enrollment for the last 2 years, and that is conducting virtual open enrollments. Now, the good news is we're a couple years into the pandemic. We've all done some virtual open enrollment sessions, so we should all feel good about ourselves. Surviving open enrollment over the last couple years is not a small feat. So we should be self-congratulatory even, that we've made it through and we survived the last couple rounds of open enrollment. So with that, we now are starting to sort of shift our gears and focus in on, okay, so there was survival, but now we want to build upon what did we learn over the last couple years? What were the key challenges that we found? And then what can we do to kind of build up from there? Because virtual open enrollments, whether in full or in part, are probably here to stay. So that's really where we're going to focus, is sort of where do we go next with some of that, some of the elements of virtual open enrollment. And we boil it down to a few questions that seem to be the most popular that we run into. So I'm going to pose this first one here, and that's how can we keep our presentations running smoothly, especially when we have so many attendees and sometimes even with multiple presenters. So I'm going to give Stephanie a chance here to chime in and maybe share her thoughts on that first question first.
Absolutely. Thank you, Travis. So to have a virtual meeting of any kind, you really need to consider your attendees as well as the presenters. I think the first step to a successful and smooth presentation is communicating effectively how open enrollment meetings will work. So when you send out pre-open enrollment communications, you have to not only send out dates and times of the meetings, but you also want to send out that step-by-step instruction for attendees on things like how to sign into a meeting, what to do once they're there. There should be some sort of brief and maybe bulleted description about what they can expect and what their role is as a participant. For example, you want to let everyone know that everyone will be muted for this meeting, and please stay muted, and please use the chat area to ask any questions, or let them know that there will be Q&A at the end of the meeting for all questions. And you can also provide a quick link on the basics of how your virtual platform will work if you're, have new employees that haven't used that platform yet.
Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of step-by-step instructions, whether it's for, logging into a session or even how to transition from a session to the actual open enrollment process. Especially if you can include any screenshots with those directions. We find, if you give employees a bit of a visual plus a step-by-step, it will eliminate a lot of the logistic kind of questions, and then hopefully make, for process to be a little bit easier and presentations to be a little bit smoother. One of the other things that we have helped some of our clients to do is provide some training for anybody that's going to be presenting or involved in the presentation. So almost like a train the trainer type of session, so that they're comfortable in what they're doing and what the goal is. So people have been in Zoom, Teams, what have you, for years now. So there should be less of how do I log in or how do I get my speakers to work, but it can still happen. So having that step-by-step can help to mitigate some of that. But having that additional piece where you're training some of the individuals that are going to lead a presentation and even do a trial run. We find that something really important around open enrollment, because we have done some open enrollment where we're pulling from 3 or 4 different areas and people and presenters. So we might have a client present, we might have a piece to present, the insurance company may have a piece that they're presenting, and then there could be even another entity that's in the mix. So doing some trial runs as you go through that, even testing the technology out, making sure that everybody knows when they're going to be a part and to test microphones, do all of those things, can really help to make a smooth process for anything that's virtual, because when you have those inevitable like tech hiccups that happen, it can be a little disorienting, for people that are on. So one of the other things that we've done is some Zoom etiquette training, which is not always the presenter, because you're hoping that a presenter has a decent Zoom etiquette, but also for attendees sometimes. So you can even talk about, how to use the raise the hand feature, or when it's appropriate time to ask or pose questions. So an etiquette piece can be helpful, because then you've got ideally, in an ideal situation, you've got your presenting and your attendees all lined up and all on the same page. So I think that's the really helpful pieces there. The second question we had posed here, some employees aren't as comfortable asking questions in a large formal session or large virtual session as well, and how can we accommodate them? And when everything was live and open enrollment meetings were live, many times what we would do is stick around after a meeting and give an opportunity for a one-on-one conversation, especially if somebody has questions that aren't really appropriate for a large group. Now, obviously, that's very close to impossible to do in a virtual setting, so we have to find ways to kind of replicate that, where we can. And we've seen that done in a couple ways. One is to schedule a separate Q&A type of webinar session where you might have a very structured, 45 minutes or what have you, where you're talking specifically about your benefits, presenting your benefits. And then a day later, a week later, you might have an open hour where anybody can bring their questions in and pose their questions. Now, if you leave it open, it is also then going to be open to whoever's in attendance. So for those more specific questions where employees might need that one-on-one, we've had some of our clients do virtual office hours. So it might be open office hours, or it might be scheduled office hours where employees that are remote and engaging through everything in a virtual platform can schedule some one-on-one time to talk to HR or whoever the specialist might be that can answer their questions around open enrollment. So those virtual hours and FAQ sessions have allowed people to be able to engage in a different way that might be tough to do when you've got like that more formal presentation structure. So the other element is to reiterate to employees the resources that they have. So if you're a client of ours, for example, we have Benefits VIP. So we always want to remind employees at the end, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes in the middle of open enrollment sessions, that you have access to Benefits VIP. And that's one of the resources where you can talk to somebody one-on-one and engage with them to have your questions answered, and reiterate how someone can get in touch with HR if that's something that is important as well. So if you reiterate what those resources are, whether it's at the start or the conclusion, or ideally both, because you can conclude a presentation with these are the resources that you have for your questions, that can be a good way to get people engaged and to get them get their questions answered. And I think the final piece was around record presentations. If you have a chance to record them and make those recordings available. But Steph, did you have some additional thoughts?
Yeah, the recording is a great subject, because not only is recording great for going back to and listening to for answers that you may have missed, but it can also be viewed and shared by other members in your household that wouldn't necessarily be able to attend a live meeting as an employee. So that's really helpful, because there are people at home that are making those decisions too. Yeah,
great point. The last question we had on here was, how can I improve or monitor attendance? And Stephanie, I'll let you go first on this one as well.
Sure. So what's great about a virtual open enrollment meeting is if it's communicated properly, your attendance will improve just because, it's accessible for everyone regardless of their location. So right off the bat, people are going to attend simply because they can attend. If they're in their office, if they're home, if they're traveling for business, the struggle and the challenge there will be making sure that they're engaged. So it's important to let your employees know in your communications to do a few things, right? You want them to unplug from everything else, to find a quiet space for the meeting. And most importantly, and I think this is the hardest for a lot of us, is to not work while in the meeting. And then verbally remind them again at the beginning of the meeting to do all of those things. Start with a game or something. You can engage people before the meeting officially starts with an activity. Maybe you do a quick, do you know your benefit terminology trivia game? These kind of things get everybody relaxed. They get them tuned into what's going on in the meeting. And of course, improving attendance is going to rely heavily on communicating open enrollment meetings early. That's the key word there is early, so that people can plan and block off time on their calendars. As soon as you know those dates of your meetings, invitations should be sent out so people aren't accepting other meetings at this time. You also want to send out more than one communication, and this is why starting early really is key. And we'll get into this a little bit deeper later on, but letting employees know that open enrollment is coming. It will be virtual this year, and to be on the lookout for upcoming communications that will, include that meeting invite and further need to know type information really is the first step. Then comes the invitation itself, followed up with a reminder closer to the meeting date. You also might want to add an RSVP requirement to your invitation so you can get an idea of how many people will be attending. And then that way you can track and compare the turnout, and then you know who you should really target specifically with communications on, what they missed, and make sure they're given a link to the recording of the meeting. And lastly, another great way to keep open enrollment fresh in people's mind is to have managers add OE information in their email signatures. So it's kind of always there leading up to open enrollment.
Great. And something else that I've seen as well, depending on the platform that you use for open enrollment, whether Zoom, Teams, or some other, most of them you have the ability to track who registered and who attended. So you can see exactly who made it to the meeting. And in some instances, you can actually see how long they stayed on the meeting, when they dropped off. And not that you need to get too big brother on managing your employees, but where that can be helpful is exactly like Stephanie mentioned, where you can see, okay, do we need to customize any of our education or communication around that? But we've also seen some of our clients get creative on how they can entice people to sign up by doing like a raffle. So having a prize where, you can win something simply by, logging in and attending the presentation. So being able to run that report, see who logged in, made sure they stayed, through the majority of the presentation, you can then enter them into a raffle and then have like some type of giveaway. And I know that, it sounds a little basic, but we've actually seen some pretty good responses when you've got some prizes that you can raffle off, especially if they're things that people like and they don't have to do anything other than sign in and make sure they're there. So if you've got that tracking, it's a nice way to, to have that reward and have that system built in that might help to kind of bump your, attendance up a little bit. All right, great stuff. Let's take us into our second challenge, which is like the yin and the yang of this entire thing. We've talked about virtual enrollments, and now we're talking about conducting live open enrollments. We've been on such a pendulum over the last couple of years where we were primarily used to doing a good portion of open enrollment education and involvement with some level of in-person. We swung to trying to do everything remote. And now the pendulum is kind of settling and we're somewhere, in the middle. And, it's a little funny. We've been fielding questions, should we even bother with open enrollment live sessions anymore and in-person sessions when we know that we can accomplish everything over webinar or virtual? And, the question is, I guess just the answer is very specific upon what connects best with your employees. But what we can share is that we have started to hold some live in-person sessions for open enrollment, and the feedback has been generally pretty positive because employees seem to like that the effort was made connecting in with some people that they might not have been able to connect in with. So we're finding that there's still a place for having in-person meetings. And we'll talk a little bit more about, combining that, virtual and live setting. But, I think the other piece to consider around live meetings are just to make sure that you can manage the logistics of that, right? Because you might have some employees or some people that are uncomfortable, maybe in a live setting. So you want to make sure you can have the appropriate size space to accommodate, a live session. And then we'll also talk in our second, bullet point here about how to integrate some of the webinar and live pieces. But if you can set up your space for success, then there's definitely a place for live meetings. And the feedback has been, pretty positive. And I think that, really does segue into the integration of live meetings and webinar meetings. And, this has been something that we've seen it and we've felt it personally at Corporate Synergies for years because we've done our own attempts, even pre-pandemic, where we had large in-person meetings that we also sent and did remote for satellite offices. And there is a lot of trial and error that goes on with that. And it may take some trial and error on your part as well. The element of conducting a live session requires a certain skill set and execution. Element of conducting a webinar could be slightly different. You put the two together and you've got a lot of pieces that have to align. And I think step one is making sure that if you're going to have a live session with a live studio audience of your employees, that you have a space that will work for a virtual setting as well. And then you test that out. So, we found anecdotally that some of our presenters at Corporate Synergies in a live setting are very mobile and they walk around. And I do that personally. When I do open enrollment meetings, I'm all over the place. I'm not a stationary presenter. That does not work great when you're trying to also run a webinar simultaneously. So you need a space that's conducive and someone that has, some of that training and that ability to be able to stay rooted to a spot, understand that the presentation is going both to a live audience as well as to a virtual audience, and to test that out and see what the right fit is for you, because it's not a one size fits all. And depending upon sometimes just the logistics, you might end up splitting sessions and doing some live sessions and some webinar sessions. We love the idea of integration because it's more efficient. You can hold one session and you're, two birds with one stone. But that could almost backfire if some of those pieces don't line up. You can lose an audience when they're unable to hear, the questions that come from the live, in-person crowd. And then you've got a dialogue happening and they don't know what the question was. That can be really difficult. Or if you can't keep a visual on the presenter, if there's not, the appropriate visuals of a slide to go along with, you don't want to see like half of a presenter's face as they're moving around. So those logistics can be pivotal in kind of determining how you integrate a live and a webinar session. And we've truly found through trial and error that it's not a one size fits all. And some of it's going to depend upon what you're hoping to accomplish and, what kind of logistics and technology that you have.
Yeah, I agree, Travis. And you spoke about the people pacing out of a camera view, and that happens a lot. So sometimes it's great just to have presenters sit so that can't happen. Or you can set up your camera for like a full view of the room. Visual participants may feel more part of the meeting with the view as, kind of like a live attendee.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, let's take us through here to our third challenge, which is going to be engaging diverse employees. Now, this topic could be a 2-hour presentation all on its own. So we're really trying to approach it with a laser focus around open enrollment, because, engaging employees is one of the hot topics just across HR and even just at the employer level. And by diverse, I mean, that could be geographically diverse, age differences, technologically, you've got, some employees that might be, easier to navigate some of the technology that you've got out there. So there's a pretty big spread of diversity among employees. So we're kind of looking at it through a smaller lens. And with that in mind, one of the challenges that we've heard quite a bit about, we have some employees that aren't as tech savvy, and they're struggling a little bit with, the virtual settings. How can we get them involved? Steph, do you want to start us off on this one?
Sure. Knowing your population and how they best consume information is crucial. You're already winning if you know that some of your employees aren't tech savvy, and that means that, you're listening to and you're understanding your demographic. Maybe you're a tech company, so the answer is easy, but most likely you have a population that's diverse in location and comfort level when it comes to technology. So with that said, 9 times out of 10, a successful communication campaign is never going to rely on just one channel of choice to reach and engage employees. So while digitally communicating open enrollment materials, it's important to consider the part of your population that's going to respond better from printed material. Print is still an effective means of communicating, and it should definitely still be used to supplement a digital campaign in cases like this. If you're sending out an e-com or an email blast regarding a new health plan that's being offered, you want to make sure that you convert that into a mailable postcard that can be sent to the home. Again, like we said earlier, there are a lot of people at home that need that information too. They need to know that that's happening. Or print that digital flyer so it can be placed on driver's seats or hung in a warehouse or cafeteria or a bathroom, wherever there's heavy foot traffic and a lot of eyes. It's also really important to make sure that you're reaching all of your employees and engaging them equally. Because when you have employees that are unaware of what benefits are available to them, or if they don't know how to access or choose them, participation and utilization is going to then drop off. And now your employees are no longer getting value from the benefit that you're offering. Not to mention that it can cause dissatisfaction within your population, which, can have a negative effect on productivity and retention.
Yeah, those are really important points. And, something that we've seen specifically around trying to get people engaged that are putting up barriers sometimes to the either the technology or the systems is just reminding individuals about what they can get on their cell phones, what they have access to through mobile technology and through their cell phones. So many times, if it's a webinar, most of those can be done through cell phone. You can log right in through your cell phone. Even providing directions on how to download an app might be able to get somebody engaged, or just letting them know that there is a dial-in option. Sometimes, it's so simple, but we would take somebody dialing in over not signing into a webinar at all. So, reminding people what they have access to, from their cell phones, and even, a lot of open enrollment elements, you can do through your cell phone, depending on if you've got, a Ben admin system that has that mobile support. So there's a lot that you can do, and reminding employees about that can also be helpful. Especially if there are employees that aren't, at a computer quite as much, that the cell phone can be that conduit. Great. So the next one here, I don't know if our staff is truly reading and comprehending the material we provide on our benefits package. That's a big one. that could probably go above and beyond even open enrollment. So I'm gonna let you start us on that path, Steph.
Yeah, definitely. This is the biggest challenge when it comes to benefits. How do we make them understandable and how do we make them interesting? We need to recognize that benefits are not easy to understand. They are confusing, and it's easy to overwhelm an employee with a lot of benefit jargon and terminology. This could be the first time that some employees are even seeing benefits. Not to mention, it's no longer the time of simply accepting one plan that a company is offering, right? We know that there's so much more choice these days. So it's really important that we're communicating with the purpose of educating. Benefits are a top item on your budget. It's put right in the hands of your employees. So if they're not knowledgeable on how to choose and use them, it could be costly for everyone in the long run. Just sending out a carrier PDF, that's not going to engage anyone or turn them into an active participant in their healthcare or make them better consumers when choosing their benefits, which should always be the goal with communications and deliverables. You want to make sure that employees are only getting the information that they need. Simplified, concise communication pieces. It's really, really tempting to put every bit of information into a benefit guide, but really less is going to be more. By making it War and Peace, you're actually doing the exact opposite of what you want your communications to do. You're then disengaging your employees. No one's going to want to read it. It looks scary. It's too much to comprehend. There are too many parts. I can't focus on this. I don't have the time. It's over my head. So, a simple description of benefits with an overview of details of what the benefit can mean for them, with a link or a direction to a place where they can go for a deeper dive into the details. That's effective communicating. Offering different means of information consumption is important too, because people absorb different, information differently. We know that some people are readers, others are listeners. So sometimes a recording is a nice addition. Or if you're like me, a visual presentation works best. So don't just stick with one format each time. Mix it up to reach everyone. Communicate your benefits in a campaign format. You want to have multiple communications on a topic. 3 is kind of the magic number for an effective communication campaign, each one diving a little bit deeper. It gives people time to take in information, understand it, get ready for that next bit of information. I always say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them in order to really drive a message home with a campaign. And, you'll be able to tell if your staff is reading and understanding the materials once you evaluate their choices after open enrollment and their behavior after open enrollment. It's important to always look back and learn what worked and, even more importantly, what didn't work for everyone. And then you can use that to set up a more successful strategy moving forward.
Great. Excellent ideas, Steph. And I think one element we can add in a little bit too, from a compliance standpoint, as an employer, there's a lot that you have to post and make available. You're required by law to do that. So most employers have figured out a way, whether it's like through the intranet or through a Ben admin system or a combination of things, but there's going to be let's call it a library of information that you have to make available. But that's also where you can post some of the more dense benefit information that is out there and available. So to Stephanie's point, having your front-facing communications be as simple and concise as we can reasonably make them, with links or directions on where to find that library and find the full scope of everything is in many times sort of the magic combination where you can get people engaged. You've shown them where they can get the greater level of detail, but you're not frightening anybody by having 20 pages for them to go through. It's only 5 pages. They can manage that. They might get scared with the 20, but you've got so much information that you have to post out there that creating that library or repository for this info and making sure employees know where to find it, that can be a nice way to strike that balance. Yeah, really good stuff. So the final question we had on this is, what can we do to help our fully remote employees, some that have never even been to an office, feel like they are part of a team. Now, again, this is another item that we could literally have another 2-hour session on. And I actually was just reading an article about remote engagement. So whether, looking even beyond whether you go through SHRM or even just a few, internet searches on engaging a remote population, there's some really good info and work being done out there right now about engaging employees, building a culture that is remote, or taking a culture that you want to, really support and champion, and finding ways to get it to remote employees. So there's some great information out there around that, some of which you can translate certainly to open enrollment. But I think when we are focusing specifically on open enrollment, we've talked about knowing your employees, and that's a key piece. So if you know how they are getting their information, what they will respond to, that's the baseline. So if you're accustomed to sending information out via email, but you've got a population that just sort of glosses over it because maybe they get too many emails or what have you, being able to then enact the plan B to get those remote employees can be really, really helpful. The other thing that we have seen is to get that sort of remote staff involved. If you're used to doing something at a physical location, or if you're planning to do something at a physical location for open enrollment, to think about a way, how can we involve a remote person with this item? So for many years and with many employers, open enrollment would involve, meetings with a breakfast or meetings with a lunch, or there would be some type of catering going on, or there would be, free giveaways from the insurance companies. There would be something that would be done for the employees just to support and thank them for showing up and to leave them with something tangible. And there are ways to do that. I mean, I think you would have a very happy, remote staff. If you sent them lunch for a meeting, you would get like the best, reviews at year end for that. But that's, logistically, that would be a challenge. But, we've seen times where, sending employees like a Dunkin' Donuts gift card with a couple dollars on it, enough to get a coffee, to feel like they're part of a meeting that would have typically had, fruit and coffee at it, is a way to make those employees feel like they're part of something. So if you've done things in the past that were geographically specific, or for like a corporate office or a specific location, that you're either no longer doing or you've scaled them differently, if there's a way to be able to translate that to your employees, that can be a really positive way to engage them. So in some ways, it's, treating your remote staff the same as you would treat, a local staff. But then there's other ways where you might want to treat them a little bit different. So we've seen clients set up a pre-meeting session for just their remote people. So if a meeting starts at 2:00, they might send out a invite 5 or 10 minutes before, just to certain remote employees, so that they can engage them in some discussion before the meeting starts, or maybe make some introductions. Sometimes with new employees, we've seen clients do that as well. So you're thinking of something that is maybe different than what you would do for either a more tenured staff or a local staff, to find a way to pull them in, whether it's a pre-meeting or a post-meeting or a separate, we've seen virtual happy hours. There are ways to really focus in on the remote staff that can help, pull them in. I was even, reading about where you can link a remote staff to somebody that's, local, so that they have like a partner or a counterpart in different geographies as well. So there's some really neat stuff that you can do along those lines. But if we think about it in terms of what can I do to create some parity for local and remote staff, or what do I need to do specifically for my remote staff to have them feel connected? Because it's really, it's about that connection is what will ultimately pull them in. And culture and connection is not a one size fits all. It really varies quite a bit depending upon a company's culture and a company's philosophy. So sometimes just thinking through processes or thinking down the road will help you land somewhere as you start to think about, engaging and having people be part of your culture. All right, let's keep us moving here to challenge number 4, which in some ways might be like opportunity number 4, which is moving away from paper. So the first one we had here, most of our employees, either don't have computers or a company email. How can we communicate and educate if we're starting to move away from paper? So Steph, I'll let you start us off on this one.
Sure. There are a lot of benefits for moving away from paper. It's going to be cost effective, especially for companies with a smaller budget. It'll save on time when materials don't need to go to print. You can reach your population quickly, most of the time immediately. And digital documents can be edited in real time to, reflect changes and updates that happen throughout the year. So think about often a benefit guide is printed and it's distributed, and a few days later, IRS contribution limits are released, and now your content is instantly dated if it's been printed. If it's a digital guide, it can be updated and reposted on a portal or relinked within minutes. So it's always current and it's always correct. But moving away from paper, as we discussed earlier, there's a challenge with it, to move away from paper completely for a lot of companies, whether it's a tech issue or the fact that some employees are not at a physical desk, and they may not even have a company email address. So you want to think about designing and creating digital materials while keeping in mind that they also may need to be printed. That's going to make life a lot easier. So if I'm designing a digital guide that I know will need to be printed for a portion of a population, I'm going to design it in a printable setup from the get-go. So I'm not doing a lot of double work, generating both. There are intranets and portals. Most people have a smartphone and or a computer or some sort of other device at home that they can use to access a portal or an intranet or an app. So all communications should be made web and app friendly so that they can be posted and accessed that way as well. Just make sure that your digital communications, especially information on new or changing plans, are distributed in a way that's accessible for everyone at home, not just your employees. We talked a little bit about that earlier. If your benefit guide is housed on your intranet, make sure it's also provided separately as a PDF that can be shared with dependents at home. Something that we're seeing that's really popular is the use of QR codes. Strategically placing QR codes around the office that can be scanned with a cell phone and linked to digital guides and content is also a great communication tool.
The QR code's a great idea. I like that one. I'm starting to see that a lot more.
In
which is
menus in restaurants and stuff. Yep.
Exactly. And frankly, the more people get used to it, the easier it is to get information, even when it's around something as big as an open enrollment. Right. So that's great. The next question we had, if we're not providing paper material, what other ways can we educate our employees? But I think is, pretty intimately tied to the previous question. But
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of ways, and you have your digital benefit guide. They're great. They work like a website with active navigation. Readers can go to specific topics that they're looking for. They can have links to carrier pages, links to PDFs. You can even put digital forms in there that employees need to fill out and return to HR. They also allow for more content with links to pages that have more info if the employee needs it. And also, again, easily shareable with people at home. You have e-coms, an embedded visual that's in an email that can be linked out to more content or to a meeting. It's fast, it's easy, it's interactive. And then you have a digital flyer, which can be attached to an email as a PDF, which, that can be a little bit larger. It can have multiple active links. It's also something that someone can print out on their own if they have, that need for that paper in hand, which some people do. And then beyond the flyer, you can do a digital newsletter. It's often, multiple pages with multiple topics in one document. And something that we're finding very successful and popular these days is the video communication. It's a short video. It's about a minute long. It covers what a benefit is all about. It's really effective if you do a few short videos that are spaced apart. And all of these samples can be easily shared with partners at home, dependents on plan. They're always accessible from your email. They're saved in your email or on the internet, so you can't lose them accidentally. You can't throw them away by mistake.
That's great. And we've been doing a lot more support with our clients on those small video tidbits. That's been something that I think has really been popular because it keeps it bite-sized as well, and people can get into the content they want and not necessarily have to navigate content that they don't want. So that's great. All right, I'm going to take us on to challenge number 5, which is maximizing systems and resources. So the first item here, we don't have a separate budget for open enrollment. How can we either maximize our resources or make a case for a budget? And this is a big one too. I'm going to start with maximizing resources here because there's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into open enrollment. And one of the ways that an HR team or an employer in general can maximize some of the available resources and systems they have really starts almost at a very simple level, which is asking and talking to your vendors and business partners how they can support you during open enrollment time. So again, that may sound overly simplistic, but sometimes it's that little bit of asking the question that will land you at a spot where you find that someone can help you in a way that you didn't expect them to. So when, just to share an example, from our standpoint, we spend a lot of time with our clients. We talk to them. We know a lot about what they're looking for, what they're trying to accomplish. But we, every now and then we'll have a discussion where we realize there's elements of their wish list, or there's an element where, their workload looks a little bit different than maybe what we thought it was. And we don't always have, that full level of insight, even though we work very closely with our clients because we're involved in a specific tangent of what they do, and that's the benefits side. But there's a lot more that an HR team does, a finance team does. So sometimes having the discussions about, this is where we need help, where an employer can say, this is the specific area where we need support around an open enrollment, it will trigger us to think in new and maybe different ways and bring some different resources to the table. So that can be true from your benefit or brokerage consultant, your 401k or 403b financial planning firms, your Ben admin systems, the insurance companies. There are new strategies, new technologies, and new support, even sometimes new resources like an insurance company that may make available that you don't get unless you ask for it. So sometimes just starting that initial conversation and asking the question, what can you help me with around open enrollment? Or here's my challenge. How do we land at a solution? We'll start to trigger some new ideas and new conversation that can help you maximize those resources. And there's a lot of different entities that end up touching an open enrollment or the benefits around an open enrollment in some fashion, whether it's the carrier or it's a business partner. There's quite a few out there. And if we don't ask for things, sometimes you don't get them. So I think that's the start for maximizing your resources, is talking to who you're connected with and seeing what you can tap into. Making a case for a budget. This is a complicated item as well because benefits are, they're very expensive, right? And if you've got a Ben admin system, that's very expensive. Payroll, these are all items that are large ticket items for any employer. So when you're trying to make a case for more money, you can have an uphill battle sometimes. So, when we talk to our clients thinking about, well, how do we make a case for a budget? You have to most certainly know your audience, right? It's very important to know who you need to talk to, what drives them, and what flexibility you have. The other piece of it is setting a reasonable goal. So we've worked with clients, for example, where, they said, we love a budget, but we don't have an open enrollment budget. And, we suggested, why don't we set a smaller goal and a smaller budget, maybe a couple $100s, enough to buy something that would encourage people to participate for a raffle or for a giveaway. And that was very easy to do. And it just started the process, and it started the conversation and the dialogue around a positive interaction with setting a budget and building a budget. So, having reasonable expectations, knowing who your audience is, and then also making sure that if you're going to spend money, that it's on items that you may be able to replicate. So things like decision support tools, they can be very helpful because they're items that you can use at open enrollment, but then also beyond for new hires. So if you're going to ask for money, thinking about what can we do to repeat outside of open enrollment can be really helpful. Steph, anything you wanted to add on that item, or we can move into?
Right. I think we can move into the next question.
Sure, and I think it ties together. Shouldn't open enrollment be easier? And we'd love like that big red easy button, because so much time and effort is put into open enrollment. And I think, from this one, it ties back into talking to your vendors and your business partners. That's a big piece of it. I think another piece is look at what works and where you're finding success or where you're having pain. So document that as you're going through your open enrollment. What's working out well, and what do we want to replicate? What's not working out great, and what do we maybe need to repurpose for the following year? Because what you can make repeatable will help to make things easier and not spinning your wheels on areas that you're getting pushback is a good way to do that. And they're not the same things for every client or even every year. So there can be one year where something works, the next year it doesn't work, and that's okay. A lot of this is going to be through repetition and effort. But if you can repeat processes, that will make them easier. And Stephanie mentioned this earlier, but reusing material as well. So if you've got material, you can customize that to open enrollment, but think about where can I divide that customization. So if I'm going to do a benefit guide and I have an open enrollment message, I may want to make the benefit guide separate and have an intro for the open enrollment that might look different than a new hire introduction, so that when I need to repurpose it, I've got 90 or 95% of it that I can reuse as is, and then simply add in a piece for a new hire. And that also translates whether it's visual material as well as recordings and such. So we've started to break material down more into segments, so that you can repurpose specific segments, and then also customize messages for open enrollment or for a new hire. And we've seen that be really important. And then planning early, where planning early is always it's such a big piece.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Start early. That's going to alleviate the stress of open enrollment. You don't want to wait to the last minute to think about sending out communications. If you can develop those communications so they're ready to go once final decisions are made regarding plans and benefits and dates, that's kind of a great strategy too when it comes to communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping an eye on our timing, we've got one more quick item that we're going to talk about before we get into maybe a slightly larger one. So mobile options we've touched on. This has been a topic that we've seen quite a bit, and it's tapping into cell phones. How can we use cell phones for open enrollment? And then where do we draw that line? Is reaching out to an employee on the cell phone a bit too much, or is it appropriate to do? So, we talked about optimizing your open enrollment material for your cell phone, and then also reminding employees on how to download applications. And if you have a Ben admin system, if you're using ADP or UKG, to make sure that the mobile element of that is set up and that your employees know about it, because that cell phone can be a conduit to engagement that is fantastic, as long as employees know that it's out there and they know how to use it and they know how to log on. Then there's the balancing act that happens as well. We've had some employer groups and clients of ours that have tapped into text programs where they can actually send texts out to their staff, to their employees. And in some instances that has been met, really positively, because that cell phone is the primary means of communication and engagement from their staff. And you can even include links within that text to be able that, you can send out a message, they can click on a link within that message, and that makes things much easier and simpler, which is, like Stephanie mentioned earlier, the goal. Easy and simple as much as we can make that happen. And text messaging can be a way to do that. We've talked about it with some of our other employers, and they felt pretty strongly that, using text messages might actually have the opposite effect, and employees might be annoyed or they might feel like it's too much. So it's about, again, knowing your people and thinking, how many ways are we getting information out there? Is it sufficient? Are people responding to it? Because if you have a lot of ways you're getting information out and people aren't responding, well, maybe we can try a different angle, and maybe using cell phone communications or using a text communication could actually replace another way of communicating to your employees. And maybe if we can measure the response rates on it, you can find out if that's possibly a better way to get information out to your employees. So mobile is big, and it's definitely going to be bigger, and it's about striking that balance, with your technology there. So moving into our final challenge for the day, communicating new and or changing benefits. So one of the things we've noticed actually over the last couple of years is that employers have been offering more benefits, not scaling back on what they do offer. And that's great news. But then there's also the challenges with communicating those benefits. So the first point here, we've been excited to offer new benefits, such as an EAP, which is one of the most common we've seen, but we're not confident all of the new offerings are fully understood. So Steph, I'll let you chime in on that one.
So, again, be sure that you're sending out more than one communication on whatever new benefit you're offering, using that campaign format. If we're using the example of an EAP, you want to start with promoting the importance of mental health, let's say, and remind them that they have a benefit for them to support that, and the main items that are covered with that EAP. With your next communication, you want to reiterate that that's for everyone at no cost, and it's completely confidential. And then lastly, you'll want to let people know exactly what's included, like the amount of sessions a person can receive with a therapist, who in their family is covered for the service, and then, simplified step-by-steps to get started. That's really important. How do I get started with this benefit? And give them that link and information.
Yep. The next item we had, open enrollment is just a short period every year, and often employees may not retain all of the details. So any suggestions for reiterating the main points or goals of open enrollment?
Mm-hmm. The goal is to, both effectively and continuously communicate with employees and, build that understanding of their benefits all year long, not just at open enrollment. So you had open enrollment and everyone's chosen their benefits and they've been informed of everything that's offered to them. Now you need to take it to the next step and promote the understanding and use of those benefits throughout the year. So, develop campaigns that teach employees the best places to go for help while saving money. For example, an infographic on the cost-saving benefits of telehealth or urgent care, all eligible services and products that an FSA will cover, and instructions on how to use it. It's always important to send out post-open enrollment communications too. Thank everyone for attending the meetings, making their selections, and a reminder to check things like their first paycheck for accuracy, update their beneficiaries, and take a survey regarding the open enrollment process, and make sure you provide a link to that survey for them.
And last but not least, how early should I start my open enrollment planning?
Not everybody's favorite answer, but if we're going to be honest, planning next year's open enrollment starts really at the close of this year's open enrollment. OE is crazy, so take a break, go on vacation. But before you lose your thoughts on what was and wasn't successful this year, write down, while it's still fresh in your mind. Get those notes and evaluations started so that you're, setting up yourself to be successful next year. Send a survey out to employees too while it's still fresh in their minds. What worked for them? How would they like to see things change for next year? And so on. But from a communication standpoint, don't be afraid to start about 2 months before. If you're having meetings in early November, send out communications at the end of August or beginning of September. Fall is open enrollment. this is what open enrollment is. Remember, for some of your employees, this could be the first time they're ever experiencing an open enrollment. So let them know what it is. Here's some benefit terms you should be familiar with so that you can be an informed consumer this year. And, then that can be followed up with campaigns on how to choose the right health plan, educating them on the plans that are offered and the basic differences between them so they can make that informed decision. And definitely start early if you're introducing any new benefits, any new health plans, anything where, a choice is going to need to be made. If you're adding a new medical plan, you really want to educate your population on why this new offering might be the best option for them. And lastly, just keep in mind that all your communications directed towards open enrollment should be consistent in look and feel so that they're recognizable as open enrollment communications. This will help people focus and read them and not ignore the content as something that, might be unimportant that doesn't pertain to them.
That's excellent. And I think, one of the pieces that we find to be really valuable is having that download, post open enrollment, post renewal download, while everything is fresh, and laying out your plan. It sounds a little crazy to plan for the upcoming year when you've just wrapped up your existing year. But if we can get everything while it's fresh and at least lay out the wish list that we've got for the upcoming year, it gives you an opportunity to really do that project plan like we talked about. Think about what you want to do 6 months out, and then 2 months out, and then right up to the point of communicating open enrollment. So if you have the luxury and the wherewithal to think of it as a ongoing process where there are times where there's high intensity and there's times where there's low intensity. But if that planning can start very early and it's ongoing, the execution then does become a bit easier, and hopefully more items along your wish list actually get checked. So taking us to, the key takeaways, again, we're sending this out to everybody. I think we've nailed the planning early part, determining deadlines and being flexible, because there is going to be a curveball. It is inevitable, but being flexible can be helpful. Considering your audience and considering your budget, using your available resources, talking to your partners, figuring out what those resources are, balancing your communication frequency and the channels that you communicate, keeping track of what works, and then reiterating your messages. So, we felt we covered quite a bit. We really appreciate everybody hanging in there and going through everything with us. And we felt it boiled down to, each of these categories. So again, we're going to be sending information out. We've crossed the 3 o'clock, the 1 hour window that we had allotted. And we do have a couple questions in here. So what we're going to do is take away the questions that came through in the chat feature and get back to those individuals that posed the questions, or maybe to everybody, because I think some of these questions are excellent and will pertain to everyone. So we will do our best to get back to that. But again, we really appreciate everybody taking some time, and hopefully you found this information helpful. I know that Heather has a few additional housekeeping items to take care of on the tail end here. So I think with that, I'll pass it back to Heather.